Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
David Muir, ABC's World News Tonight, America's most watched newscast. Now streaming same day with all the breaking news of the day on Disney Plus. Most watched, most trusted. Now on Disney Plus every night.
Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. The tornado outbreak, multiple states at risk of severe weather, a mid-air bomb scare that forced an emergency landing, and Iran reversing course on the Strait of Hormuz, ships coming under fire. First, the dangerous weather. Dozens of tornadoes reported across the Midwest, down trees, damaged homes. One eyewitness describing the terrifying moment when a tornado swept over a school. Tonight, more storms on the way, and then a dramatic change, including a return to freezing temperatures. Our weather team is timing it all out. A passenger jet forced to divert to Pittsburgh, the crew deploying emergency slides to get everyone off the plane safely. The noise that had the pilots worried about a potential bomb on board. Tonight, the audio recordings from the cockpit and what authorities are now saying. The standoff over the Strait of Hormuz takes another turn. Less than 24 hours after President Trump said it was completely open, Iran now saying the strait is closed and firing on ships attempting to pass. The Iranians angry over the U.S. blockade of its ports. President Trump saying Iran got a little cute and insisting they can't blackmail us, and what he's threatening to do when the ceasefire expires in a matter of days. Pope Leo hoping to turn down the temperature, saying it's not in his interest to debate President Trump. The Pope delivering a message of peace in his landmark trip to Africa. Breaking their silence, the family of a 14-year-old girl whose body, police say, was found in a car belonging to the singer David, is speaking out after his arrest in the case. The terrifying moment at a spring college football game when a skydiver fell into a scoreboard. Plus the historic auction, a piece of Titanic memorabilia sold for an astronomical price. Playoff fever, dramatic finishes in the NBA and NHL playoffs as new stars emerge. And the seniors taking over Coachella, their heartfelt message of comfort and safety to the young festival goers.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight. That leaves an impression. Stream now on ABC iView.
Today, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz again and demands the US lift its naval blockade. A man dies after being struck by a car outside a major comic convention in Melbourne. A Brisbane school restricts the use of student images on its social sites over deepfake and AI concerns. And the Adelaide Crows pull off an emotional 1-point victory over St Kilda without captain Jordan Dawson. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Stephanie Morris.
Repeated breaches and acts of piracy under the guise of a blockade. Pan-Africanist activist
Africa News. The news.
Pan-Africanist activist Kemi Seba has been arrested in South Africa, where authorities say an extradition process is now underway. Known for his strong anti-Western rhetoric and large media following, Seba is wanted by Benin over alleged support for a failed coup attempt in December. Police say he was detained in Pretoria alongside one of his sons and a facilitator, accused of attempting to illegally cross into Zimbabwe via Limpopo River. reportedly with plans to continue on to Europe. He remains in custody with a court hearing scheduled for April 20th. Seba, whose real name is Stelio Giles Robert Capo-Chichi, faces charges in Benin, including inciting rebellion and threatening state security. A vocal critic of France and African governments aligned with Paris, he leads the NGO Urgencies Pan-Africanists and has publicly supported military regimes in the Sahel. Authorities in Benin say they are preparing to secure his transfer, though sources suggest Seba would prefer to be sent to Niger instead. A controversial sovereignty protection bill under review in Uganda's parliament is raising alarm among critics who say it could have far-reaching and potentially severe consequences for ordinary citizens. Officially, the law aims to shield the country from excessive foreign interference, but in practice, it could label many Ugandans as foreign agents. The bill would require anyone receiving money from the diaspora to obtain authorization from the Interior Ministry, with penalties of up to 10 years in prison for non-compliance and up to 20 for offences like economic sabotage. It also caps foreign-linked funds and could affect up to 1 million Ugandans abroad, potentially even questioning their citizenship status. Civil society groups are calling it a liberty-restricting law, warning it may undermine constitutional rights and severely impact families dependent on remittances. The bill could be adopted as early as May 10th. A standoff between Iran and the US is intensifying. President Donald Trump says the US will maintain its blockade on Iranian ports unless a peace deal is reached, warning the ceasefire may not be extended. In response, Iran has reimposed strict control over the Strait of Hormuz just one day.
This is Asia Now.
It's 9 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 6:30 in New Delhi, and 8 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Keith Liu. At this hour, Iran shuts the Strait of Hormuz after briefly opening it on Friday. Tehran has demanded Washington to lift its blockade on Iranian ports, which Trump says will continue until a peace deal is signed. India summons the Iranian ambassador after an Indian-flagged tanker came under fire in the Strait of Hormuz. New Delhi has urged Tehran to reopen the waterway as the country grapples with energy shortage. A mass shooting in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv has left 6 people dead and 14 injured. The gunman barricaded himself with hostages in a supermarket before being shot and killed by the police. Authorities are investigating the shooting as an act of terror. Iran shuts the Strait of Hormuz once again after briefly opening it on Friday. The IRGC has warned it will target any ship approaching the waterway. The UK has reported that a tanker and container ship had come under attack off the coast of Oman, while India said 2 of its vessels were shot at. Tehran has blamed Washington for the move, demanding
Hello, you're watching the Sky News. I'm Nick Qureshi here at the headlines. Vessels in the Strait of Hormuz report being fired on by Iranian gunboats just hours after Iran said it was closing vital waterway again. Tehran blames President Trump for its U-turn, but he says he will not be blackmailed and that peace talks are continuing. After Iran, is Cuba next in Trump's sights? We'll have a special report on the people suffering from the US fuel blockade. Also ahead, Sky News understands that 2 senior civil servants were aware for weeks that Peter Mandelson had failed security checks before they decided to inform the Prime Minister. And the Titanic life jacket that has fetched well over £500,000 at auction. Hello, very good morning to you. There is fresh tension and uncertainty in the Gulf. with vessels in the Strait of Hormuz reporting they've been attacked by Iranian gunboats after Tehran once again closed the vital waterway. This less than 24 hours after opening the strait. Iran said it had changed its mind and said President Trump's insistence that a US naval blockade would continue was in breach of a ceasefire agreement. Ceasefires in Iran.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. President Donald Trump says the United States will not be blackmailed by Iran again closing the Strait of Hormuz. Several ships are reported to have been attacked in the waterway. Iran is blaming the US blockade of its ports for its decision to reimpose the closure. A day earlier, both Tehran and Washington declared the strait open. India has summoned Iran's ambassador after shots were fired at two Indian-flagged merchant ships, forcing them to turn back from the strait. The foreign ministry said the diplomat was informed of India's concerns over the incident, which reportedly involved a large oil tanker carrying about 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude oil. Iran had earlier permitted the safe passage of several vessels bound for India. Ukrainian police have shot dead a man alleged to have opened fire on people in the street and taken hostages in a Kiev supermarket. The gunman killed at least 6 people and injured more than a dozen. Ukraine's security service is treating the incident as terrorism.
The Football Mafia on France 24.
Hello, this is Night Watch here on France 24. The headlines. The UN Secretary General denounces a suspected Hezbollah ambush that killed a French peacekeeper and wounded 3 other soldiers in southern Lebanon. French President Emmanuel Macron demanding Lebanese authorities arrest those responsible. They attacked the latest test for a fragile 10-day ceasefire. A standoff between the US and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz deepens as the Islamic Republic closes the vital waterway just 1 day after reopening it. Tensions rising after Iran also fired on container ships on the strait. 6 people killed and 14 injured after a Russian-born man opens fire in a district in the Ukrainian capital. A motive still unclear, but Ukraine's security service has opened a terrorist investigation.
Several developing stories as we come on.
On this Saturday night, whiplash and new violence in the war in Iran. Following the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz Friday, it's now closed again. Why Iran is laying the blame squarely on the Trump administration. How China is benefiting from world disorder and the lifting of sanctions on Russian oil, thus forging a future for female physicians.
There still is a considerable gap for women going into surgical specialties.
The program to inspire the doctors and surgeons of tomorrow. And after 4 long years, the Raptors are back in the NBA playoffs with fans backing them all the way.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. There are just 4 days remaining before the end of the 2-week ceasefire in the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. And despite President Trump...
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin. Saturday, welcome. Are there times when you think the country's out of control, when you see what's going on in the streets, when you see the attacks on ICE, the attacks on cops, when you see sort of these Islamists with the IEDs throwing them at people, or you hear some of these imams, or when you hear what's going on in our colleges and universities, you see all these things and you wonder, what in the world is going on? It wasn't this way 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Well, I wonder from time to time, and we have a president who's trying to do something about it, finally. We have other presidents who contributed to this. But let me take you into this subject a little bit here. In 1964, James Burnham, a philosopher, scholar, writer, one of the founders of National Review, he wrote a book called The Suicide of the West. The Suicide of the West. He saw over 60 years ago that the parts of the world where Western values existed, undergirded by Judeo-Christian principles, the Enlightenment, well, they were shrinking. And he pointed out that the West was in decline. And if it did not act to stem the decline, it would cease to exist in any meaningful way. You see what's going on in Europe and so many other countries. Burnham argued the West was strong enough to stop the decline and perhaps even reverse it, but that there was a lack of will to do anything about it. In fact, Burnham said, the problem is that the West and the United States had lost the will to defend themselves. And he blamed liberals, what we call today the left. He explained that the left in America and Europe had no intention of saving the West. They promoted the decline and fought any effort, small or large, to preserve Western values. And we see that today, everywhere. Burnham, again, writing in 1964, noted that this wasn't about the 1930s New Dealism, but that something else, even more pernicious, was taking place. He couldn't quite define it in a word or two, but it was devouring the West, he said. Burnham wrote that for the left, and I quote, all conceivable evidence will be explained away in order to defend the chosen doctrine. And ideological thinking cannot be refuted by logical analysis or empirical evidence. Sound familiar? When you hear these members of Congress, when you hear these leftists on TV and so forth and so on, why aren't facts working? Why isn't evidence working? Why isn't experience in history working? Because they have their ideology and they're not giving it up, so you can't penetrate it. In many ways, that is the crisis today. Actually, it's more dire today, I would argue. The left today is made up not...
Thank you for watching. I'm Shakil 5858. I hope you will come again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.